Do you ever wonder how successful entrepreneurs built their businesses from scratch? Are you unsure if starting a business is for you? Well, tune in as we discuss how successful entrepreneurs transformed their ideas into reality. Welcome back to From Zero to Revenue with your host, Chris Yap.
Welcome to our podcast show, From Zero to Revenue, the show that features the journey of successful entrepreneurs and how they transform their ideas into revenue. I'm your host, Chris Yap. Today, I'm super excited to have our guest here, my very good friend, my business coach, our growth coach. Please welcome the founder of Ethos Advisory Services, Ian Thurbon. Ian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
So happy to have you here. So Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what's Ethos, what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the IT consulting business for around about 30-something years. I stopped counting at 30.
Yes.
Started out as a mechanical engineer, was not particularly good at it, found my way into software and technology, and ultimately crafted a career that led to being CEO and president of 5 different companies. Through that journey, I learned a lot about how to scale, how to grow organizations in a systematic way. And I turned my attention to sharing that guidance and advice with other organizations.
So I love it. Just to kind of preface and for our audience sake here, we met back in 2017. That was through LinkedIn.
Yep.
So you've obviously seen our journey from like zero to where we are today, and you being our business coach now. I gotta say, I've wanted to hire you earlier. I just couldn't afford you yet that time.
Not that expensive, but no. I mean, it's always been a great joy of mine to interact with young, emerging entrepreneurs, advise where I can on a gratis basis. Help them along that journey, and then when the opportunity presents itself to engage in a more commercial way, that's fantastic. But I'd have happily stayed providing guidance and advice for people that I consider high-quality professionals.
I would definitely take that as a compliment. So Ian, obviously, we've known each other for a long time, and in those years we've known each other. When VCs, PEs purchase companies, they put you in there to kind of lead the SWAT team. Tell us a little bit about that experience and, what are like some trends you saw as to why companies fail, why they succeed, but, give us maybe an overview of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. So as an entrepreneur, it's always important to keep in your mind how the outside world sees you.
Okay? Yep.
And that outside world could be a potential acquirer down the road. It could be investors. It could be a company you're trying to acquire. It could be a bank when you're looking for a loan. It could be all manner of different reasons. But you have to maintain a mindset of external observation of your own business. It's too easy to get lost in drinking your own Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Yep.
And believe in your own narrative. It's important to maintain that objectivity, because that's how the world will look at you. And they'll look at you very much, if it's an investment basis, if it's a private equity or a VC, they're very much going to come at it in a formulaic way. And it's important to know what those conditions and criteria are. And grow your business with that in mind, not with that exclusively. You're building it because you believe in what you're doing, but always keep that as a counterbalance to a lot of the decision-making you make along the way.
Awesome. So, I for this episode, we'll definitely focus on growth engines, because that's what we've been working on. And just for the sake of our audience, this is not our typical episode where we talk about, Ian's failures or and how he came up.
We'd
about
need
it.
a much longer episode for that, so.
Okay, well, we probably have to do it over a bottle, not a glass of whiskey. But on this episode, we'll have you share like stories of what you've seen work and what didn't. But before we get into that, let's talk about this concept of growth engine. When we got you engaged with our team, that's the first thing that really got stuck in my head, where you made us realize that the growth we had was opportunistic versus deliberate, right? Can you tell us the difference between the two and why it's important to recognize it and do something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's businesses go through different stages of evolution, right? When you're founding your business and you're getting started, invariably the initial growth is coming from a handful of first customers, possibly network introductions, referrals, those kinds of things. And that can provide some really valuable early stage growth. To go beyond that, however, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all start that way. I started my own company the same way. You initiate that initial growth cycle. But to go beyond that requires a degree of intentionality in terms of how do you plan out a growth engine? How are you going to create a systemic way of achieving that growth for the long term? That doesn't mean you abandon what got you to where you are. It just means you need to incorporate new techniques and tools and intentionality as to how you think about your growth of your business.
So if you can share with us, like with your experience working with founders, what's your experience as far as their growth mindset, strategies, and things like that?
The first and most important thing is understand why you want to grow.
Yes.
Okay, what is the objective? Growth for growth's sake, can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen that way. But think about what you want the ultimate outcome to be. It could be an exit. It could be to triple the size of the business in order to be in an acquisition stance yourself. It could be simply to create more financial stability in the business by hitting a certain critical mass. But know what your goals are, because everything comes back to the goals, okay? You have a different growth strategy if you're looking for a 3-year exit than you do if you're looking for a 10-year lifestyle business. They're completely different investment profiles. So know why you're trying to do it, and then think about how you're going to approach it in a systemic way, okay? How do you bring in new paths to revenue to complement what you've done historically? How do you reinforce your customer base? And how do you create a stable growth vehicle for the organization?
So I remember during our first session with my team, that was the first question you asked. Like, what are you trying to achieve, right? And you're correct. Like for others, they're trying to grow because they want to exit. Like in our case, we want to keep growing. This is more of a generational wealth we're trying to do with my team, or for my team and for the family. But what's key in what we're doing now together is that having that systematic growth and building that growth engine. Because in our case, we grew like a lot, like, in 5 years, few 100%. But it was an opportunistic way, because it was, the market was there and we were getting referred a lot. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
However, it's not really systematic. And, to share with our audience, what we're doing right now with Ian is we really developed a systematic growth engine where it really has an on-off switch. There's a lot of variables in it. So Ian, if you can talk about, like, we went through the zebra exercise again for all the growth engine building purpose. If you can give us a high level what the growth engine's about, and maybe an overview of how to kind of build that growth engine.
Yeah, it obviously takes a lot of drilling into the details, but at a conceptual level, it invariably starts with an ideal customer profile mapping that matches your why you want to grow, right? So if the goal is to be valued at a certain price point, or to create a certain type of customer base, you got to profile what those customers look like. What are the criteria that you're seeking? So understand the size of the customer you're looking for, the type of industry they're in, the nature of their business such that it maps to your services. That may require you to adapt your services a little bit as well to meet that profile. Understand who are the decision makers in those organizations. So it's a fairly standard term in the industry, which is ICP, Ideal Customer Profile. Creating that profile is the first thing that has to happen to know where you're going to go hunting for customers. Right? Are they in North America? Are they in certain regions? Are they do they associate in certain associations or organizations? Where can you find them? So having the ideal customer profile then helps you determine where you're going to find those customers. Once you've determined where those customers are, you then have to start working on, well, how am I going to get their attention? Okay, how am I going to interact with them? And then that moves you into what I call a message layering exercise, which is since the dawn of humanity, we've conveyed information through stories. Business is exactly the same with storytelling. And when you're telling a story, it has a certain structure to it, a scene setting, characters, a plot of some description, okay, and invariably a conclusion, a punchline of some type. And that's exactly how we communicate in business. We just don't realize it for the most part.
Yes.
So going through a message layering exercise to first identify the ideal customer profile's pain points. What is the pain you're curing? Again, all business is invariably around curing pain, somebody else's problem, solving somebody else's problem by providing a service, a product, or something like that. So identifying those pain points and then crafting a layered message approach on how you're going to communicate your value proposition to those customers or prospects is actually critical. And it takes a systematic way of doing it. You've been successful already, so you have all the raw materials. Now you just need to put it into a framework that allows you to operationalize it and get the rest of your organization and your agents and your channel partners and whoever else all singing from the same song sheet.
Well, I can tell you this message layering because, we did that exercise. I don't want to say it's not easy. It's not really too complex, but it really takes a lot of work because as the term it suggests, it's systematized, it's systematic. There's really a way that speaks to the human behavior on how you communicate with them. Because before we just say, yeah, we're a staffing company. Right. But now with how we're doing it, by the way, Gurley closed 2 deals already just using that exercise. So I know it's working. And what's great about it too, it's like because we've finished our strategic, our message layering, it's so easy to communicate across the team as well. So everyone can say the same thing. We are saying the same thing exactly the same way, which is just never happened before. Again, we've grown to where we are today, but now that we're approaching growth in a more systematic way, when it's systematic, you can replicate it.
Exactly. And because you're going to need to replicate it across your digital presence, your website, your LinkedIn profile, your communication vehicles, whether it's email or signage at events. It all follows the same pattern and comes back to this initial message layering. We then moved into, after the message layering, we did the elevator pitch exercise. It's not that you're necessarily ever going to deliver it in that exact way, but it helps you crystallize the layering of the messaging,
the components of
it, and how it's always got to be attached to the pain.
Yes.
Because that's what you're selling.
And just to go back to this systematic approach, what I mean by you can replicate it. You can replicate the formula, like it's a blueprint, but you can replicate it in different industries. Because, with us, we have 3 to 4 like primary targets or industries we're working on. What's amazing, and I'm already seeing this in action, we expanded in Australia. We used the same formula used in the US, uses Australia. And it's just amazing. We're seeing the same cadence. We're watching the same KPIs on different campaigns. And then we launch it in a different industry. Again, the same KPIs we're watching. We've never had this kind of very systematic approach because I feel like before we had the shotgun approach. Now it's so focused. It's so sniper-like approach. Right. It's just amazing. And the reality too is we're doing so much more, but we're not as stressed as we were before.
Right.
Because we're organized.
Because you're not making it up on the fly, right? That takes a lot.
Yes.
That takes a lot of energy.
And just a quick side note too. So I told you I got approved for an SBA for like $500,000. I actually sent them our ICP and how we're gonna do market. And the loan broker said, Chris, you have the most organized like market
great.
approach. Like in the last 6 months of clients he spoke to, I said, that's Ian's work there. So I don't want to say it's the reason why we got approved, but obviously I'm sure it had a big impact because they've probably felt like, oh, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's going back to some of my opening comments, right? Think about how the outside world sees you.
Yes.
Right? These things have value to observers. And if at some point there were an exit and you can show a 5-year path of intentional growth through experimentation and exploration within a structure, you're going to get valued higher in many categories because it was done in that intentional way.
Right. So Ian, in your experience, obviously, sure, you create the system, right? And I think it's a myth for business owners to expect that it's just going to work the way it's supposed to work. What's your experience? Because as the term suggests, experiment.
Yep.
What's your experience like when a founder launches this? And what's the difference between a founder being successful in it versus someone who's just kind of given up on something?
So it's a process, right? It's a framework. It has to be a process and a framework because you're not going to get it right every time. You're going to be successful sometimes. You're going to fail other times. And everybody's heard this phrase, right? Fail fast and learn, right?
Yes.
But that's the point of engaging your thoughts with the outside world. You need to capture that feedback. Did it work? What kind of responses did I get? Sometimes a message will work 1 month and it won't work another month because the environment changed a little bit. So it's about creating an adaptable response. And to do that, you have to be with intention, market, try and solicit new customers, see what the engagement and the response is, learn, adapt, and adjust. Because you're going to evolve multiple times throughout your journey and your value proposition will evolve multiple times. So it's the systematic approach that's the most important thing. Now, what I will also say is this can take time, but it also takes resilience. And if you really don't have the appetite, either energy level-wise or financially, because it will create, a structured growth strategy will compress EBITDA over a period of time before you'll cycle through different growth cycles. There'll be investment in growth, which will compress your financial performance, and then you'll accelerate out of it. If you don't have the appetite for that journey, do not embark on it, would be my advice. Keep doing what you're doing because you're making a good living at it. So you have to have that commitment, the resilience, and the understanding that it is to a degree experimentation.
And Ian, in your experience, you've obviously coached, a lot of like CEOs, founders. Would you say there are like some key denominator as to like founders who succeeded and versus those who didn't? Are there like key, whether virtues or, personality or background? Are you seeing any common denominator as far as, for entrepreneurs who actually succeed?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer because in some cases I know people that I never thought would be successful were incredibly successful.
Wow, okay.
But oftentimes that's circumstantial, how that happens. But if you kind of aggregate it out, for the most part, I found the most successful long-range entrepreneurs have been committed to growth, have maintained a degree of humility, that they haven't got it all worked out, and have decided to be lifelong learners and adapt and grow, because that's what happens in markets. That and a recognition of what it takes, because it can be a very lonely journey. I self-funded and started my own consulting company as an entrepreneur many years ago. were in 2008, which was wonderful timing for the financial crisis. But we were able to grow that business systemically and sold it to a French public company. And we did that because we stayed focused on the mission, what we were trying to accomplish. And we invested where we needed to invest and recognized that it was at a particular point that we were trying to reach required that investment. But we also surrounded ourselves with good advisors. Sometimes paid, most of the time just great network of people we knew who could guide us and advise us. And we remained humble. Although we were running a company and it was successful, we also recognized we had a long way to go.
So I love how you recognize that humility, because I feel like there's a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, I personally know, who lacks that, and they get that blindsided because I think it's when you have that ego that you know everything, you're better than everyone.
Yeah.
That's your biggest.
But we're all sport and egos, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be entrepreneurs.
Right, sure.
That comes with the territory to a degree. Trying to blend that with a degree of humility is critical.
Right.
Otherwise, if you didn't have that component of your personality, you wouldn't even be pursuing this.
Right.
At one point in my career, I was help operate and stand up a company that was focused on entrepreneurial mental health, because the statistics were alarming on the amount of entrepreneurs that were in mental health challenges. And a lot of that comes from not having a structure, not having a support infrastructure. It's the loneliest place on the planet.
Yeah.
It can be a horribly lonely place. So create a village, right? Create a family around you of people that can guide you, advise you, and you can think your way through these problems. But stay aware. That's the main thing.
So I love that. I think what you shared, it's perfect timing right now, because, you know, people are saying we're about to go into a recession, but I honestly think we already are in a recession. You mentioned 2008. We have some similarities, situational environment, etc. And I just want to say I completely agree with you on, you know, build that community. Like, obviously we hired you as our coach specifically for our growth. We have an organizational health coach. You know, we have our EOS. I personally have my mental health coach, my physical health coach. I mean, some of these are really free because, you know, when you're surrounded with people who support you, they're just really willing to help. They want to see you succeed. But obviously there are professionals that you have to really make the investment. It really has to be seen as an investment. If you look at like athletes preparing for the Olympics, they have a mental health coach, they have strength training coach, they have nutrition coach. And as Mark Cuban said, you know, business is the most competitive sports out there. Because here, it's not just trying to win a gold. Your competitors are trying to take your livelihood away from you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. So, definitely humility. As you've seen in many enterprises that you've been involved with, and as you mentioned earlier, not everything you plan will actually turn out to be as planned. There's going to be a lot of failures, right? How important is resiliency for entrepreneurs? Because I feel like I've had so many ups and downs, and really the only reason why I'm still here is, aside from my wife supporting me, is I'm just a stubborn guy.
Yeah, stubbornness could be very helpful if it blends into resilience.
Yes, right.
But it is a distinctly resilience, and it's an acceptance that there are going to be ups and downs. And as long as you maintain the mindset that you're going to learn from the downs,
right?
And I often share a story. I've been through, talking about economic cycles. I went through the Y2K boom and bust. I went through the dot-com boom and bust. I went through the 2008 crisis. In every scenario in a down cycle, I believe I've learned more about how to operate a business than I ever have in a growth cycle. So don't take a negative as truly a negative. There's something to be learned.
Yeah.
Right? You can adapt, you can adjust, you won't repeat the same mistake again necessarily. But resilience is absolutely critical. Be prepared for the journey. Don't get knocked out with the first knockout punch. Just get back up and keep swinging. And if you have a structure, you have a systematic way of getting back up, that can really be helpful.
Yeah.
Because you're not trying to do it from scratch.
Right. So I could kind of relate to that right now, because obviously we launched different campaigns now for growth. Some are working. I'd say everything's working because we're learning, right? And I think, to your point, you can learn from the wins and from the losses, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I guess the question is, how do you actually, is there a specific way where you can kind of draw some learning from a loss or a win? Like, how do you go about that and making sure that you don't repeat the same mistake?
Yeah, so in the context of what we were talking about before of ideal customer profile, message layering, working out what your overall marketing strategy is going to be, you're going to see certain wins and failures in each of those different categories. What's important is to try and to analyze what feedback you've received. Okay, it could be that you're getting zero engagement on a marketing strategy. You don't get a lot of feedback from that, right? But when you go into an event and you're talking to 100, 150 people over the course of a 3-day event, you're going to get information. You're going to see how people respond to your positioning, to your messaging. The same with the prospects that you pursue. Failed sales cycles is always important to try and understand, why did we fail? So never just accept a loss from a prospect. Always go ask them why you lost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
What was missing from your approach? So and then bringing all that feedback into the structure of how you go to market strategy is aligned helps you adjust it. You may not have the answer, but that didn't work. Well, let's try this one. And you just keep cycling through different types of approaches until you find the one that works. And as I said earlier, it may work this month, right? You may get a huge success on one particular type of campaign approach. That doesn't mean it's going to work next month. If the economics winds change in a different geography, always be receptive to that feedback.
Gotcha. No, 100%. So our audience are mostly entrepreneurs as well, fellow entrepreneurs. What would you say is your advice for them? We have a lot of entrepreneurs, our audience, who are kind of starting as well, and obviously that's it's hard to get started, right? What do you say are the stages? Because obviously no stage in business is the same. When you're doing $4 million, $5 million a year, that's a completely different stage from when you were building. What are the layers, or what are the stages, just so for everyone's kind of like perception, so they don't feel like, they're stuck, and just for them to understand this is not forever. What are the stages of growth, you think?
Certainly from inception, it comes out of identifying. It can come out of a couple of different places. Either the idea for a better product, a different approach to selling something, or a different way of servicing a market. So oftentimes it will come out of an idea, and that idea requires validation. And the first thing you do is got to test market it and prove out that people are willing to exchange money for this idea. Then you start moving into an early stage of operationalizing it. It's very, very entrepreneurial, very fluid. Oftentimes, as we talked about earlier, comes from some initial network connections you may have, personal relationships you may have. And then typically that can take a business anywhere from, inception to $1 million, typically up into that $3 to $5 million range of revenue flow. Then you start breaking into business operational restraints in terms of, how do I go from 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on and so forth. And each of those require a different organizational approach, different investment in additional leadership, different operating mechanisms within the business, but they all have a very different personality. Okay. and you require a systemic growth engine to push you through those.
Yes.
But then you have to build an organization to support it at those different points. In the early stage, you're chief cook and bottle washer, right? You're doing everything. And then ultimately over time, all those things you used to do get passed out into different departmental activities. And the people you had with you at the beginning, oftentimes grow with the business, but they also don't oftentimes have all the skills to move from iteration to iteration. So you obviously want to be a good employer. You want to be a humane employer, but you've also got to recognize the fact that not everybody's going to make the journey because the skills just won't fit. An entrepreneurial skill set doesn't always meet well with an operationalized business.
Right.
So recognize, again, it's going to be a journey. Things are going to change, and that you're going to have different investment cycles that you're going to go through to get through the different growth barriers.
So I love how you made it clear the different stages, because I myself, I kind of struggled through that, when we hit a million, from million to two, on and on. We did it so fast that, and obviously when you get to a high level of revenue, it's a place where you've never been at. I've, like me personally, and this is why coaches like you is very important, because you've seen these journeys many, many times. You already know what to avoid, where to capitalize or what to capitalize on. And we're about to do our, what do you call this, skills assessment or
the mentoring.
Yeah, the mentoring and things like that, right? Yeah. It's important really to assess and be honest. Like, I think that's a very, very critical virtue to have, aside the humility, is the honesty. Like, if you say, or if your coach tell you that, hey, you're lacking on this, or your manager is lacking on this, it's either your coach or find someone else. You just really need to be honest to yourself that this is a reality that I just have to accept.
Yep.
But no, I love how you had that clarity in the different stages in business. There's probably a lot of our audience who are also struggling, whether it's growth or just getting it up there. I know I went through struggles of my own. What words of advice do you have for them? As a founder yourself.
Yeah, I'm obviously, without repeating the whole resilience and intentional action side of things, it all comes down to the honesty aspect of it, right? Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know your team's strengths and weaknesses, and be prepared to adapt and evolve along those lines. But first and foremost, it's be systemic about how you want to grow the business, okay? And so that you can grow it, because what you will find, if you do any kind of research on business history and technology history, you'll see the landscape is littered with businesses that were founded on better technology, better services, better capabilities, but did not succeed. For those that are old enough, it's the Betamax type video cassette, right? Superior. Same with the Laserdisc versus the CD versus the DVD. Better technologies that didn't work. And the reason they didn't work is because they failed in their go-to-market strategy. Okay, they didn't systemically grow that business. And then stay aware of what's happening in your market, because the next group of stories are the blockbusters, right? They didn't change with the evolving landscape around them. All of that requires humility, right? Accepting the fact that you may have the best mousetrap on the planet, but if you can't market it and you can't find a systemic way to sell it, all you've got is a relic.
Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. And again, it goes back to the importance of the growth engine.
Yep.
And I know as a founder myself, when you're starting the business, you just want to sell. You just want to get a client, whoever is willing to sign up. But it's very, very important to develop this growth engine. So Ian, for our guests who want to learn more about you, how you can help them build their growth engine, what's the best way to connect with you and contact you?
Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Probably the easiest way. I do have a day job where I run an organization. I sit on the board of a few other organizations. But I keep active in my advisory work. Find me on LinkedIn. We can maybe provide some contact details through you, Chris.
Yep.
But I'm always delighted to invest a lot of time, get to know people, see if there's any value to be had. And even if there isn't at that point in time, I love building network.
No, absolutely. And we're gonna obviously have your contact information here. And Ian, before I let you go, is there a favorite quote or favorite mantra that you have that you'd like to share our audience just so they can keep pushing through?
Yeah, well, you know me, Chris. You know I've got like 100 of those per conversation.
That's why I had to ask.
But I think my favorite one is no battle plan survives contact with the enemy.
Oh my God, I love that.
Right? It's again, be ready to adapt.
Yeah.
Right? Have a plan. It's important.
Yep.
But recognize that plan is going to change. And then my second one, and this is one I live and run this mantra I operate my businesses through, which is there's no stronger force in the universe than inertia. So go for controlled momentum. Establish a plan, a direction, create some momentum. It's much easier to move an object that's in motion than the one that's sitting still. So don't stand still.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, Ian, thank you so much. This has been such a blessing and honor to have you in our show today. Thank you so much. And guys, until next time, again, this is Chris Yap, your host of From Zero to Revenue. I'll see you guys next time.